Welcome to Headliners Forum. We're here to bring you the best in Texas journalism, the stories behind the great stories. I'm Mark Morrison. Our special guest is Mose Buchele, Senior Energy and Environment Reporter for KUT Austin. Mose won this year's Charles Green Award, honoring the state's best radio reporter for 2019. This award is presented annually by the Headliners Foundation of Austin in partnership with the Texas Associated Press Broadcast Association. Mose, you have won this competition several times. Congratulations for this year's honor.
Thanks so much, Mark. I appreciate it.
You cover some very important areas that have a big impact on your listeners. How do you go about choosing your stories and manage to tell them in an interesting way on radio?
Well, I guess for one thing, you kind of needed to see what story would lend itself most to a narrative kind of storytelling format, right? As reporters, there's a lot of stuff we need to cover, and we need to cover thoroughly, but there are some things that are breaking news that are more just kind of fact-based, or updates to story, kind of ongoing stories that you can provide your audience with information on that without giving a lot of time to it. A lot of the stories I do that really stand out, basically, I think the main secret is just trying to find the time to devote a lot of thought to structuring them well, thinking about them, the sound that you're going to be able to use, and also, like I said at the beginning, which ones may lend themselves to actual storytelling. So if I come home and I'm talking to my wife, or I'm talking to a friend, and I'm getting animated and I'm moving my hands around a lot, and I'm there's a narrative there that's all natural to it, then I know that this is going to make a really good radio piece. And so that, just to kind of have an ear for that, and I just to kind of underline it, honestly, also to talk it out with people as many times as you can, and to think it out as long as you can. All this stuff takes time, and so as much as I, respect deadlines, I also try to sometimes push them as far back as I can when I know that spending more time on it can really produce something special, right?
Right. And as one of your listeners, a lot of creativity involved too. You've been especially busy covering the hill country showdown between property owners, environmentalists, and one of the world's largest pipeline corporations. Yeah. Tell us about some of your coverage there, why it's so important.
Well, it's wildly important because it touches on almost everything that people hold sacred in the state in a lot of ways, right? I mean, a pipeline is it's so many different things to different people. Like, a pipeline is about energy, it's about the economy, it's about jobs, it's about fossil fuels. It's also about the environment. I mean, this is all on my beat, right? It's about climate change, it's about local environmental concerns. And in Texas, you also have this really strong question about private property rights, which has been an issue. I've been doing this beat for a long time, and long before I started, it's been an issue. And so you can approach these projects, which often turn into battles, right, from so many different angles.
Of course, the economic aspects are also very important.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. So I try to find a way to tell each of those stories as well as I can, and honestly, sometimes making the conscious decision, like this time I'm going to look at it this way. This time we're going to have to look at this other way, so that for a story as big as a pipeline project, you can't necessarily put it all in one piece, right? You have to point to your kind of ongoing body of work if you're really trying to tell the whole thing. And for me, honestly, another main key to that is just being able to listen to the people who are on the ground, and take some of my cues from those people, but people of all differing opinions, and also try to get into it from an explanatory perspective. People have all these questions. They hear that a project is going to come through their county, their town, maybe their backyard, and there are so many different things they just want to know, just kind of facts they want to know. What does this mean? And so part of my job I also see as just being able to provide that information at its very core. And I've found, you know, when we look at our stories online, a lot of those stories get a lot of attention and are shared a lot on Facebook groups and all that, because they're just, if I hear someone has a question about this stuff, I want to tell them the answer, right?
In one case, you covered a condemnation hearing, which sounds like something that would be a pretty boring legal procedure, but actually when you listen to your story, you managed to bring some life to that. Tell us how you did that.
So, you know, this goes back to the narrative question, right? When I heard about this type of procedure, it's kind of this quasi-legal kind of procedure that goes on when a company wants to take land for a certain amount of money and the landowner disagrees with the amount. They go into this room and there is this essentially what is a legal back and forth. It sounds dry, but immediately that you have a built-in story, right? I mean, like in the course of one day, you're going to go in there, you're going to hear these two sides give their arguments. And in the case of these types of procedures, you actually even get the end. You know, at the end of the day, they generally come back and they give an answer to both the company and the landowner. So I knew right off the bat that if I could go to one of these things, I could have this narrative that could be really compelling if I treated it the right way. One of the real challenges with that story is that going in, I wasn't sure how to get sound, what sound I could get. You know, people are talking to their lawyers. You want to kind of be respectful of what might be in a context that almost feels like a courtroom, even though it isn't. You're not quite sure what's allowed. But I was able to pretty quickly, like, kind of figure that out, and then tell the story just through the course of the day. As you tell the story of this one family, and specifically this one woman, in her conflict with the company, you can also get into all of the background, right? You know, like what is this pipeline about? What are people's concerns about it? Everything else, but you do it through this story, and that's really what can keep people listening, hook them in. How's this woman going to fare? What's going to happen with the pipeline company? These are questions you want answered at the end, so you'll keep listening.
Right. I can't imagine a more challenging assignment than the Texas power grid. Eyes glaze over at just the mention, right? Well, explain how you brought music and sound effects into this story and made it pretty entertaining as well as informative.
I might be the only one, Mark, but I'm kind of a power grid nerd. I love learning about the grid and like how electricity moves around. But it is really tricky to report out, and this is the story that you're referring to, the one with music, where essentially I tried to interweave this song to explain how the grid works. That took a year to do. And that was a gift. Essentially, it was a throwaway line from a guy I was interviewing, who, it was the end of a long day of interviews, and I kept asking people I was talking to, is there some metaphor you can use, some way that you can describe this that people will understand listening in their car radio, because this stuff can be so complicated. And finally, I think I'd asked the question like 4 or 5 times, and the guy just blurted out, it's kind of like this song. And once he said that, I knew that I could, he's giving me this almost this gift, right? I can take music and use it to describe this really technical thing. And in radio, I mean, there's nothing better, right? That's going to keep people cued in. And so then it was just a question of, I had to go back and get a little more tape. I had to think it out. But power, grid issues, I guess you could say, are a long-standing concern in Texas. I knew I had the time to kind of get into this story in order to produce a radio piece that I could be proud of. And yeah, I thought that worked out really well. And yeah, it's just about listening for those cues, like, oh, that's it. That's what I can do.
And you ended up using some Led Zeppelin music as part of that, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. That's even listening to that song, my source had mentioned Led Zeppelin and this drummer John Bonham, and there's a song, because it's all about how the grid flow, like moves energy back and forth. And the song itself even speeds up and slows down in such a way that really complements the technical description of how all of this works. So, I mean, sometimes you just get lucky. And I think in that case, it really, part of it was just serendipitous.
Right. We hear about power outages in California right now, and this has been an unusually hot summer, not only there, but in Texas as well. Do Texans need to worry this year? Is the music going to stop?
I mean, if you listen to the people who are, whose job it is to make sure that doesn't happen, it sounds like we don't run too much of a risk of that right now. Currently, there are a lot of people still working from home, and so and a lot of business slowed down because of the recession and the pandemic. So a lot of energy use on the industrial or commercial side is down, but you see us all here in our houses, residential use is way up. Electricity use during the weekends is breaking records right now in Texas, and we are in an extreme heat wave, so you never know.
Right. Texas doesn't have a reputation of being very progressive on environmental issues, yet surprisingly, it's been a leader in wind farms, and one of your reports found coal plants that are shutting down in the state, maybe not just purely for environmental reasons, but with some good environmental effect. How do you size up the state of environmentalism versus economic development in Texas?
It's way more complicated than a lot of people understand, especially a lot of people maybe outside of the state who just have the sense of the state as a purely fossil fuel driven thing. This state leads the country in wind power and was very forward thinking in the way that now I'm going to geek out on the electric grid again, but like in the way that we set up our grid to move renewable energy, specifically wind at that time, but more and more solar around the state. As a country, as we keep bringing more and more renewables online, people are going to continue to look to Texas more and more to try to figure out how this works. And we were also benefited by the fact that we have a power grid that is kind of sovereign almost. It doesn't cross any of the state boundaries really. So we're able to create these policies in a vacuum. And in the case of our renewable energy, it's really been to the benefit of that power.
Right. You've been known to have a little fun with your beat, and tell us about the race you set up to demonstrate some of the navigation problems during the gridlock of a South by festival.
This was one of my favorite stories that I did in the last year, and it was it's also funny to listen to now because it involves crowds and going out and being with people. And then a year later they canceled South by, right? But this story was right around the time when e-scooters started taking off. You see these people everywhere on these scooters, and it was a real big local point of conversation, even controversy. People loved them, people hated them. How is the city going to regulate them? And on top of that, you have the perennial traffic issues associated with Austin. During South by Southwest, everything shuts down. So in that case, there's a source, a guy who I years ago I put out a call online for somebody to do a South by story with me. This gentleman agreed, and he's kind of somebody who's up for anything. And so I knew that I had one person willing to do this experiment with me. It was going to be a race with an e-scooter, someone on a bicycle, and then someone driving a car to see who could get through South by the fastest. And so I lined him up. I found another woman, again, on Twitter, actually. I'm doing this more and more, kind of sometimes just reaching out to listeners to see who might want to participate, right? And then the third person ended up being my brother, because he was visiting from out of town at the time. But it was a really fun, kind of simple story idea, but technically very difficult. How do I record these people all in different places doing different things through this really dynamic environment. We ended up putting lav mics on all of them so we could get them narrate their own trip through South by Southwest. At the end of the day, I was left with, I can't remember how many hours of tape, right? Because I taped before, after, and then I had everyone narrating their trips. And it was like this Rashomon, you know, like different perspectives. Like I had to weave them all in to show this race that went on. And it was super fun to produce. One of the funnest stories I ever probably produced. And then it got some serious stuff in, you know, people talked about traffic and just city policy around all these different transportation options.
Right. The pandemic has turned every journalist's world upside down this year. How has it changed your focus and the mix of stories?
I mean, I like to get a lot of story ideas from being out and noticing things in the natural world or talking to people. And there's I'm less able to do that, you know? And so it's made it a much bigger challenge. I feel like a lot of my ideas right now are more almost inward looking, which is maybe not a good thing. You know, and you notice this trend, especially right as the first kind of stay-at-home orders went into place around the country. One of my favorite stories I did at the time was about just being with my kids and going around, wheeling them around the neighborhood, these empty neighborhoods, and I still feel that impulse to kind of like just like look to my immediate environment. Some really great radio can come out of that, but at the same time, I worry about what I'm missing by not being out as much. Now, that's changed quite a bit since other big stories have come up and I'm going out more again. But frankly, it's been hard. You know, more phone interviews, more Zoom interviews, and it's been a difficult adjustment.
Yeah, and I'm guessing you may have had more listeners than usual with a lot of us pinned up at home.
Yeah, I mean, you know, and one thing that we've seen for sure is that we have a lot more people going online. You know, like our online delivery is just skyrocketed, right? And so people reading the articles and listening online, podcasts, all of that I think has benefited. You know, not to make it sound like a good thing, but you know, more people have been listening as they've been stuck at home.
Mose Buchele, thank you for sharing your reporting experiences with us. Former AP radio managing editor Bill McCloskey, the judge in this contest, complimented your creative use of sounds, exquisite writing, and delivery to explain sometimes obscure technical topics. Congratulations on your great work last year and on your Headliners Award.
Mark, I really appreciate it. It's a real pleasure to talk to you. Thanks.
On our site, you can link to some of Mose's outstanding work and to interviews with other award-winning Texas journalists. From my colleague and Headliners Forum producer, Gary Pickle, I'm Mark Morrison.